existential. So you never really became feast as such. Yes. Okay, everyone, thank you again for turning up. So we have a couple of presentations, and then we'll go to the beach. So the first one is Gustavo, Oliva de Oliveira. Yeah. Double-barreled Oliveira. He's going to be speaking on Gita-inspired panentheistic cosmopsychism and atheist cosmopsychism.
Panentheistic.
Let's say, yeah, panentheistic. Let's not say
Panentheistic.
panentheistic. Oh, no. I'll leave it up to you. Too.
Okay, thanks.
Over to you.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm going to speak, but before a few disclaimers. So first, forgive me for any problems of pronunciation. And second, I'd like to mention that my background is in epistemology and moral philosophy. So I'm quite, my knowledge of some of the literature and scriptures that I'll discuss is limited at best. So the purpose of this paper and this talk is to talk about cosmopsychism and explore the differences between and some features of two versions. And one of them is an atheistic version of cosmopsychism, and the other one is a theistic version, connecting the Bhagavad Gita scriptures and cosmopsychism. And this connection draws heavily on Professor Silvestri's work. So I'll try to single out some potential advantages that this version has over the atheistic version. Where should I point to? Okay, so the structure is quite simple. First, I'll introduce what I want to do, then I'll talk about the atheistic version, and I'll then talk about the panentheistic version. So cosmopsychism is the view that the cosmos is conscious, to put it simply. There are a number of ways you can get there, but among people that I will be discussing with, one is to think that you accept some form of panpsychism and also priority monism. So this view can be theistic or atheistic, and the difference is whether you think of the cosmos as divine or not. So I will argue that atheistic cosmopsychism cannot fully account for the existence of evil by denying omnipotence, nor for the fine-tuning of the universe by denying omnibenevolence. The reason I want to get into this is that some defenders of atheistic cosmopsychism, and I'm thinking mainly of Philip Goff, argue that the view has attractive features when it comes to some familiar problems in the philosophy of religion. So while the problem of evil is generally known as a problem for classical theists, the existence of fine-tuning is sometimes regarded as a problem for atheists because it's the basis of an argument for the existence of God. And so what Goff and other cosmopsychists of the atheist tribe want to do is say that this view kind of offers the best of both worlds where you can kind of account for both. Naturally, I don't want to imply that those problems are definitive for both atheism or classical theism. So, of course, there's an endless discussion in the literature about that. And you have options if you are a classical theist, and you have options if you are an atheist. For example, there's skeptical theism for the theists. There's multiverse explanations for fine-tuning for the atheists. But at least if those considerations shake you, cosmopsychists offer a theory that can account for both. That's their aim. But then I will argue against that. I will say that there are problems. Maybe it's not a knockdown argument. I think it's actually quite a modest argument. But I will offer the theistic version, inspired by the Bhagavad Gita, as a version that I think has some advantages over this one when it comes to accounting for both the problem of evil and fine-tuning at the same time. So some defenders of this atheistic cosmopsychist view argue that it is in good position to explain both. As I mentioned, Philip Goff is the best known. He holds that the cosmos has a consciousness and is an agent, and it responds to value, which is why it fine-tuned the world for the existence of life. So it is an agent, and it does care about creating value. And concerning the problem of evil, Goff suggests that maybe this agent, while it is benevolent, I mean, it cares about producing good, it is not omnipotent. And so the existence of evil is explained by the fact that this agent has some limitations that eventually lead to the creation of evil. So I'll present the argument against that. But before we move, I just like to remark that this is a specific version of cosmopsychism that I'm attacking here, which is also known as agentive cosmopsychism, because it takes the cosmos to be conscious, but also an agent. Yeah, conscious agent. Okay. Yeah, so the argument goes as follows. So in true analytic philosopher fashion, I did formalize it. If atheistic cosmopsychism is true, then either the laws of physics necessarily lead to natural evil, or the cosmic agents not benevolent, is premise one. Then premise two is, it is not the case that the laws of physics necessarily lead to natural evil. Premise three is, if the cosmic agent is not benevolent, then the cosmos is not fine-tuned for life. Four is, the cosmos is fine-tuned for life. And so it is not the case that the cosmic agent is not benevolent. And the conclusion is that it's not the case that atheistic cosmopsychism is true. So the idea behind the argument is to say that the roots for the cosmopsychist, the atheistic one at least, to defend themselves from both problems, fine-tuning and evil, they kind of cancel each other out. Because when you go for one of them, you can maybe answer evil, but then you cannot answer for fine-tuning, and the other way around. So I'll try to show that more explicitly. So they can account for both. Because if they say that the agent is not all-powerful, and that's why evil exists, they should also explain how exactly these constraints, these limitations, lead to natural evil. And it's hard to see that explanation arising with the tools that this theory have. That was something that Harvey Codron has explored in a paper. But it is very hard to see how you get from laws of nature to and other limitations maybe that this agent has to natural evil without a better characterization of these limitations. I mean, obviously Goff and the others could try to improve this characterization, but so far it is quite vague and very hard to believe that this explanation will come for every instance of evil that we can observe. So premise one is fueled by considerations concerning the relationship between atheistic cosmopsychism, the problem of evil, and fine-tuning. The fact that it's not clear at all how the constraints of laws of physics necessarily give rise to evil is what motivates premise two. And then because it is hard to see how every instance of evil is necessary. And then to see why we should accept premise three, we must look at how atheistic cosmopsychism tries to explain fine-tuning. He defends that the agent is responsive to value, and therefore fine-tune the world for the existence of life in order to produce more value. So it is benevolent in some way. But this does clash with considerations regarding the existence of evil, which is why some suggest that we should reject omnibenevolence. The cosmic agent could very well, this is what they try to do, is like a model where the cosmic agent is benevolent, but only a little bit, not fully benevolent, not omnibenevolent, and therefore permit the existence of some evil. While it does not seem impossible that this is the case, it might be hard to conceive of these arbitrary flaws. Because why would an agent that is powerful and rational, because this cosmic agent does have like mental states, like beliefs, desires, and intentions, and it cares about value enough to fine-tune the world for life, why would it not maximize value, right? It seems irrational. It would be a kind of a quirk, right? A weird quirk for this cosmic agent to have. And so the idea is that the hypothesis of a cosmic agent that cares about value only a little bit is more complex, less probable, less likely than the idea of a fully benevolent cosmic agent. This is a point that even Goff himself makes when considering the possibility that the cosmic agent is irrational to some sense, that it's a simpler hypothesis to postulate it being like perfectly rational or perfectly benevolent than to postulate something that has a little flaw, because then you have to explain the origin of this flaw. Otherwise, it's kind of arbitrary that it has this little flaw. So given fine-tuning, it seems more plausible that the cosmic agent is omnibenevolent, just fully benevolent, than being a little bit, the middle of the way benevolent. Hereupon Goff's own remarks about the comparable plausibility of postulating flawed and flawless universe, which is basically this point. The hypothesis that the universe has a flawless capacity is much simpler than the hypothesis that the capacity of the universe has some arbitrary flaw. So that's kind of the crux of the argument against the atheistic version, which takes me to premise 3. The rest is conclusions, and I'm pretty sure everybody knows basic logic well enough to get to the conclusion that if the premises are true, then atheist cosmopsychism is false. And then I started to explore some potential responses. Obviously, this is not meant as a knockdown argument, just maybe should make us decrease our credence in this view, make it a little less plausible, because of that you have to postulate a weirdly irrational in some senses universe. But then when talking with my tutor in writing the paper, we consider whether maybe limited benevolence was not irrational. Because what made us think that it was weird to postulate a flawed universe was that if you care about value, why not maximize it? And as some of you know, probably the philosophers at least, rationality is taken to be this is the most popular view of rationality in philosophy, is that you should maximize value. But then we wonder, what if you reject standard decision theory or standard theories of rationality and accept some other view? And so I wanted to account for that. So one way of maybe getting out is to say that rationality does not require maximization of value, and that it requires you to hit some threshold when you have good enough value. And so maybe if that is to be rational, the cosmic agent that does not maximize good is not irrational. Yeah, it's rational. I mean, it created the world. We have life. That's good enough. I mean, it would be also good enough if he went further, but not necessary. Um, but the problems that oops, the problem that there's a whole literature on that regarding bounded rationality, um, that introduces a satisficing conception of rationality, which means rationality was when you satisfy some threshold and then you're fine. You don't need to always maximize it. But the problem, I think, is that it is hard to motivate such a view of rationality for a being that's omniscient and that is very powerful, if not omnipotent. Because this view was more thought of as a view of rationality that is more realistic to humans who have limited information and desires that are quite specific. So, so the theory has some problems. First, there's the problem that it might not differentiate itself very well from the maximization theory. That was a problem in the literature back then. You could find out. Byron is an author that explores that. But then there's the other problem, which is hard to motivate that when you're talking about a cosmic agent. So those considerations lead me to think that atheistic cosmopsychism, while is promising, does have some problems in that the view sounds weird. And it's not the cosmic part that is weird, but the way that it tries to account for both evil and fine-tuning in the philosophy of religion. Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, I will offer a version of theistic cosmopsychism that is heavily inspired by Professor Silvestri's work. He did develop some ways to bridge the scriptures in the Bhagavad Gita and the cosmopsychism in a panentheistic way. And I will try to argue that this version has some advantages over the atheistic cosmopsychism version. So theistic cosmopsychism is the view that the cosmos is conscious and divine. So there's the big difference. And this idea can lead us to panentheism, which is different, a little different from pantheism, as some people have explored before here. But it's the idea that then panentheistic cosmopsychism, that the cosmos is conscious and divine, but it's also this divine being also transcends the cosmos. So it is the cosmos, but also more than. Oops, I keep going back instead of going forward. A conception like this is present in the Bhagavad Gita. So according to Silvestri's interpretation, the Gita's model of God might be characterized as panentheistic. In the Gita, God has a close relationship with the cosmos. All states of being come from God and are in God. The text also depicts God as immanent to the cosmos. In the often repeated theological claim, Vasudeva is everything. But the Gita also portrays God as transcendent to the cosmos. Krishna does not stand in beings, and beings do not stand in him. So you have this weird view where it's both immanent and transcendent to the cosmos at the same time. This is not only compatible, but seems to be linked to cosmopsychism. And is also present the idea that is similar to the agentive cosmopsychist idea that God has mental states such as desires, intentions, beliefs, etc. And so before I move on, just want to explain maybe what Professor Silvestri meant as a version of cosmopsychism that is both, where God is both immanent and transcendent, because that could seem a little contradictory. So to make sense of this, we need to introduce a distinction between capital C cosmos and cosmos. that shows how, according to the Gita, God is immanent and transcendent at the same time. So he suggests this should be done through interpretation of capital C cosmos that is based on a non-spatial interpretation of proper parthood through the primitive concept of prakti, which involves the notion of ontological dependence. And so the idea will be that proper parthood is not understood merely as in a spatial way, which means that God can be in things, but also outside of things, because they ontologically depend on God. So Silvestri argues that the cosmos is the totality of all actual concrete objects based on whatever interpretation of proper parthood is considered. Usually, spatial interpretation is more standard. And so people conflate capital C cosmos with a lower C cosmos, which would be the totality of concrete objects. The concrete object of which all actual concrete objects are spatial proper parts. But if you assume a different interpretation of proper parthood, like one that involves ontological dependence, then you can have the view that God is immanent and transcendent, because it's immanent to a capital C cosmos, but transcends lower C cosmos. So key idea is ontological dependence, and the scriptures do provide support for that. According to the Gita, God is the fundamental entity that supports reality. And then I have some verses, obviously from a translation, sorry. But it says, all creatures find their existence in me, but I am not limited by them, which in itself does represent the immanence and transcendence simultaneously. These creatures do not really dwell in me, and though I bring them forth and support them, I am not confined within them. They move in me as the winds move in every direction in space. So according to Silvestri, the concept of prakti in the Gita is to be interpreted as a primitive metaphysical, denoting the intimate relation that exists between non-conscious concrete objects and living conscious beings on the one hand, and God on the other. And then he argues for this reading, which, because it involves ontological dependence, makes it so that things can depend ontologically on God, and then it's immanent to one of the cosmos and transcends the other. One thing that this interpretation of this concept of prakti is more, it's longer and complex, but the ontological dependence part, though this interpretation is not reducible to ontological dependence, it's the more relevant part here for my argument. And so capital C cosmos is defined as the maximal object of which all actual concrete objects are prakti, which makes it so the cosmos is not identical to the capital cosmos, but ontologically depends on it. So you have like two concepts of cosmos. And then it's possible for God to be immanent in the capital C cosmos, but transcend the lower C cosmos, saving this version of Gita panentheistic cosmopsychism from the criticism that it is contradictory to take God to be both immanent and transcendent. So going to the last part, I will argue that two considerations slightly support the Gita version over atheistic version. So the first one concerns the characterization of cosmopsychism and the cosmic agent. And the second one concerns new routes that cosmopsychists can explore to defend themselves from the argument in the first section. So the characterization of the cosmic agent under Gita cosmopsychism includes that it instantiates experiential mental states, but also propositional attitudes. It is rational. It contains all other beings, including the superior prakriti, which are the subjects, that have experiential consciousness, and it is defined. It's a being on which everything ontologically depends on. And as Professor Silvestris does point out, this kind of variety of experiential states, propositional attitudes, solves the issue of in God needs to be very complex if everything is to depend ontologically on it. And so this characterization of complexity makes it easier for this version to account for the ontological dependence of everything, while the atheistic version does not have that. So assigning divineness to the cosmic agent gives the upper hand to theistic versions. So considering, for example, the discussion concerning the existence of evil, there is a characterization in the scriptures that talks about the existence of evil, which is known as karma theory, right? I don't want to get it too much into that, because the point of it is not to make a successful defense against the problem of evil. It's just to point out that this characterization is there. So if there is a failure of rationality in this cosmic agent, it is not completely arbitrary, because we can kind of understand where it comes from, even though it might not justify the existence of evil. Meanwhile, the atheist cosmopsychist does not have characterizations like that. So this cosmic agent, by virtue of being a little more vague, it's hard to make sense of its limitations because they are not well described. And so I can move to the ending. I think that the better characterization that you get when you move to the theistic version is what makes it a little preferable, since the lack of characterization was the problem, I think, with the atheist version. Now, this is a slight margin. For some reason, the last slide is a little bit. This is a slight margin, I guess, because presumably atheist cosmopsychists could come up with explanations for why things are like they are and characterize it better. And then we would look at the theory and think, okay, so there are flaws, but they are not as arbitrary as before. But so far, it's hard to imagine what that will be. When you ground the cosmic agent in a established tradition, perhaps that will make it easier to see why the flaws of rationality exists, even if you think those are flaws. So the argument is largely neutral on whether you think the problem of evil is actually a problem, if karma theory can actually tackle it. But the idea is just to make that even if it fails, it still makes the theory a little more plausible than the atheist counterpart. Yeah, so that's it. The last slide, for some reason, is not working.